The morning sun streamed through the massive windows of the Lambert mansion, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. Dust particles danced in the light as Sofia Rodriguez moved quietly through the east wing with her cleaning cart. At 32, she had the kind of face that showed both kindness and determination, eyes that had seen struggle but refused to be dimmed by it. For nearly 3 years now, Sofia had worked as a housekeeper for the Lambert family. The sprawling 20-room estate sat on the hills overlooking the city, a monument to the success of tech billionaire Richard Lambert. Working here paid twice what she could make elsewhere, allowing her to send money to her parents and younger siblings back home while also saving for her future. "Good morning, Mrs. Bennett," Sofia said with a slight bow of her head as the house manager walked by with her clipboard. "Sofia, don't forget Mr. Lambert is hosting a dinner party this weekend. 20 guests. Very important people," Mrs. Bennett said without looking up from her notes. He specifically mentioned wanting the crystal chandelier in the main hall spotless. "Yes, ma'am. I'll take care of it today." Mrs. Bennett paused and looked up. "Also, he requested that you specifically prepare the guest rooms. He was pleased with how you arranged things for his mother's visit last month." Sofia nodded, feeling a small surge of pride. At least her work was noticed, even if she herself often felt invisible in this house of wealth and privilege. What nobody in the Lambert household knew, not Richard Lambert, not Mrs. Bennett, not the gardener or the chef, was that Sofia Rodriguez once had a very different life. 10 years ago, she had been known as Sofia Delgado, a rising star at one of Europe's most prestigious music conservatories. Her hands, now slightly roughened by cleaning chemicals, had once flown across piano keys to thunderous applause. As Sofia polished the antique mirror in the hallway, she caught a glimpse of her reflection. Sometimes she barely recognized herself anymore. She wore the standard uniform, a simple gray dress with a white collar, her thick dark hair pulled back into a tight bun. Nothing like the flowing dresses she once wore on stage, her hair styled elaborately for performances. Life had a way of changing paths when you least expected it. Her father's sudden heart attack had been the first domino to fall. Then came the medical bills, her mother's struggle to keep their small business afloat, and finally the difficult choice: continue pursuing her musical dreams or help her family survive. The choice had been clear, even if it broke her heart. Sofia's thoughts were interrupted by the distinct sound of the grand piano in the main living room. The notes were hesitant and slightly off, probably one of Lambert's children, she thought. The family had twin boys around 10 years old, who took piano lessons every Wednesday but seemed more interested in video games than music. She smiled to herself. Their piano teacher, a stern woman with thick glasses, always looked slightly frustrated when she left. Sofia sometimes wanted to tell her that learning to play well took passion, not just practice. The cleaning cart squeaked slightly as Sofia pushed it toward the kitchen. The chef Paolo was busy preparing lunch, the smell of fresh herbs filling the air. "Ah, Sofia, just in time," he said with a wide smile. "Try this, tell me if it needs more salt." He held out a spoon with what looked like a rich tomato sauce. Sofia tasted it and closed her eyes for a moment. "It's perfect, Paolo, maybe a tiny bit more basil." The chef laughed. "Always with the good taste, this one. You should have been a chef, not cleaning these floors, if only he knew." Sofia had once dined at some of the finest restaurants in Europe, hosted by patrons of the arts who had seen her potential. Now she was grateful for the staff meals and the occasional leftovers Paolo slipped her to take home. "Mr. Lambert called," Paolo said, lowering his voice slightly. "He's bringing home 4 guests for lunch." "Very last minute, as usual," Sofia nodded. This happened often, Richard Lambert making spontaneous decisions that sent the staff scrambling. "I'll prepare the dining room right away." As she arranged the fine china and crystal glasses in the formal dining room, Sofia could hear Lambert's voice in the distance growing louder as he approached the house. His laugh was distinctive, loud and slightly forced, the laugh of someone used to others finding him amusing. "And then I said, why invest millions in something we can build ourselves for half the price?" Lambert was saying as he entered, followed by 3 men and 1 woman in expensive business attire. They all chuckled on cue. Sofia kept her eyes down and continued working, trying to become part of the background as she'd learned to do. The wealthy rarely noticed the people who served them unless something was wrong. We'll have lunch in about 20 minutes, gentlemen. And lady, Lambert added with a nod to the woman, feel free to freshen up. Sophia, show Miss Patel to the powder room. Sophia nodded and gestured for the woman to follow her. Unlike the men who barely glanced at her, Ms. Patel, a striking woman with intelligent eyes and an air of confidence, gave Sophia a genuine smile. Thank you, she said, as Sophia showed her to the elegantly decorated powder room. This house is incredible. Do you enjoy working here? The question caught Sophia off guard. Few visitors ever asked staff about their feelings. Yes, ma'am. The Lamberts are fair employers, she replied carefully. Ms. Patel seemed to read between the lines. I see. Well, thank you again. Later that afternoon, after the lunch guests had departed, Sophia was cleaning the living room when she found herself alone with the grand piano. It sat in the corner by the floor-to-ceiling windows. A magnificent Steinway concert, grand in glossy black, probably worth more than what she'd earn in 10 years. Sophia glanced around. The house was quiet. Mrs. Bennet was in her office doing paperwork. The chef was at the market, and Mr. Lambert had gone back to his office downtown. The children were still at school. Her fingers tingled with a familiar longing. How long had it been since she'd played on a proper piano? The community center where she took night classes had an old upright, badly in need of tuning, that she sometimes played when the building was nearly empty. But this? Before she could talk herself out of it, Sophia sat down on the bench and lightly touched the keys without pressing them. The smooth ivory felt like greeting an old friend. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to play. She started with something simple, a Bach prelude that had once been her warm-up piece. Her fingers were stiffer than they used to be, and she hit a wrong note in the third measure, wincing slightly. But then muscle memory took over. Her hands remembered what her mind had tried to forget. Sophia lost herself in the music, moving from Bach to Chopin, a nocturne that had always been her favorite. She played softly at first, then with more confidence, the sound filling the vast room with a melancholy beauty. She didn't hear Mrs. Bennet enter the room. Sophia, her hands froze above the keys, and she jumped to her feet, her heart pounding with fear. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Bennet. I was just... Where did you learn to play like that? The house manager's usually stern face showed nothing but shock. Sophia stared at the floor. I studied piano before, a long time ago. Before? Mrs. Bennet raised an eyebrow. Before I came here. Before I needed to work as... Sophia gestured to her uniform, not finishing the sentence. Mrs. Bennet was quiet for a long moment. Well, she finally said, the piano needs to be dusted, not played. Please finish your duties for the day. Yes, ma'am. It won't happen again. As Mrs. Bennet left, Sophia felt a weight in her chest. She quickly wiped down the piano, trying to erase any evidence she'd been there. But as she worked, she couldn't help but wonder if Mrs. Bennet would tell Mr. Lambert about the incident. Would she lose her job over this moment of weakness? The thought made her stomach twist with anxiety. This job was her lifeline, not just for herself, but for her family back home who depended on her. That evening, as Sophia gathered her things to leave, Mrs. Bennet called her into the office. Sophia, about earlier today? Here it comes, Sophia thought, preparing herself for the worst. I've worked in houses like this for 30 years, Mrs. Bennet said, her voice softer than usual. I've seen all kinds of people who ended up in service jobs. Former teachers, artists, even a doctor once who couldn't get licensed in this country. She paused. Life takes unexpected turns. Sophia didn't know what to say, so she remained silent. Mr. Lambert is hosting an important dinner party this weekend. 20 guests, including potential investors for his new tech venture, Mrs. Bennet continued. The pianist he hired just called to cancel. Sophia's heart skipped a beat. I didn't tell him about your talent, Mrs. Bennet said. That's your business to share or not. But I thought you should know about the cancellation. He'll be in a foul mood about it tomorrow. Was this a hint? A suggestion? Sophia couldn't tell, but she felt a strange flutter in her chest, something she hadn't felt in years. It felt dangerously like hope. Thank you for telling me, Mrs. Bennet. As Sophia left the Lambert estate that evening, walking to the bus stop in the fading light, her mind raced with possibilities. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to remember who she used to be. Not just Sophia the housekeeper, but Sophia the pianist whose professors once said could play at Carnegie Hall someday. The weekend's dinner party loomed in her thoughts. Would she dare to reveal her past? What would someone like Richard Lambert, born into wealth who'd never known real struggle, think of her secret talent? Sophia didn't know, but as she boarded the bus that would take her back to her small apartment, she felt something shifting inside her, a quiet determination taking root. Whatever happened at that dinner party might just change everything. The day of Richard Lambert's important dinner party arrived with a flurry of activity throughout the mansion. Sophia had been at work since dawn, polishing silverware until it gleamed, arranging fresh-cut flowers in crystal vases and ensuring every surface sparkled. Her thoughts kept drifting to the piano situation, wondering if Mrs. Bennet had mentioned anything to Mr. Lambert about what she'd overheard. Sophia, the table linens in the dining room need to be straightened, Mrs. Bennet called as she bustled past with her ever-present clipboard. And Mr. Lambert wants to speak with you when you're done. Sophia's heart jumped into her throat. With me? Did he say what about? No, but he's in his study, Mrs. Bennet replied, already moving on to inspect the kitchen preparations. Sophia smoothed the crisp white tablecloth with trembling hands. Had Mrs. Bennet told him about the piano after all? Was he angry? Would this be her last day working at the Lambert estate? She couldn't afford to lose this job, not with her youngest brother starting college next semester, depending on the money she sent home. She took a deep breath, straightened her uniform, and headed toward Lambert's study. The heavy wooden door was slightly ajar, and she could hear him speaking loudly on the phone. What do you mean you can't find a replacement? Lambert's voice boomed. The party starts in 5 hours, and you're telling me there's not a single pianist available in this entire city? I'm paying you to solve problems, not create them. Sophia hesitated, her knuckles raised to knock. Fine. Just find me someone who can play background music that won't embarrass me in front of the Henderson group. I don't care if it's a high school student, just make it happen. He slammed down the phone. Sophia knocked gently on the door. What? Lambert barked. Mrs. Bennet said you wanted to see me, sir, Sophia said, stepping into the room. Richard Lambert sat behind an enormous mahogany desk. At 45, he had the confident posture of a man who was used to getting his way. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and his tailored suit probably cost more than Sophia earned in 3 months. Ah, Sophia, yes, he said, immediately shifting into a more pleasant tone. The caterer said they'll need extra help serving tonight. We're short-staffed with Miguel out sick. I know it's not your usual role, but I'll pay you double for the evening. Of course, Mr. Lambert, I'm happy to help. He nodded, already turning his attention to the papers on his desk. Good. Mrs. Bennet will show you what to do. Wear the black serving uniform, not the cleaning one. Sophia hesitated. This was her chance, possibly her only chance. Her heart pounded so hard she thought Lambert might hear it. Sir, I couldn't help overhearing. About the pianist canceling. Lambert looked up, his eyebrows raised in surprise that she would bring up something not directly related to her duties. I could play, sir. If you need someone. Lambert stared at her for a moment, then let out a short laugh. You play piano? Like Mary Had a Little Lamb kind of play? Sophia felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment, but she stood her ground. I studied at the Royal Academy in Vienna for 3 years, sir. Before I came here. The amusement faded from Lambert's face, replaced by confusion. You're serious? Yes, sir. I can play any style you need for the evening. Classical, jazz, contemporary pieces. Lambert leaned back in his leather chair, studying her with new interest. Why are you cleaning houses if you can do that? The question stung, though Sophia knew it wasn't meant unkindly. It was the same question she'd asked herself countless nights. Life doesn't always go as planned, she said simply. My family needed support, and this job pays well. Lambert seemed to consider this, tapping his pen against the desk. Play something for me now. Sir? The piano in the living room. Show me what you can do, and I'll decide if you're good enough for tonight. Sophia followed Lambert to the grand piano she'd played days earlier. Her uniform felt suddenly restrictive, her hands clammy. Everything she'd worked for these past 3 years. The steady job, the reliable income, the quiet invisibility that kept her safely employed. All of it was at risk for this moment of pride. She sat down at the bench, adjusting it slightly as Lambert watched with arms crossed. She placed her hands on the keys and closed her eyes briefly, letting the muscle memory guide her. Then she began to play. She chose Debussy's Clair de Lune, beautiful but not overly showy. The familiar notes flowed from her fingers as naturally as breathing. For a moment, she forgot Lambert was there, forgot she was wearing a housekeeper's uniform, forgot everything except the music that had once been her entire life. When she finished, the room was silent. She turned to find Lambert staring at her, his expression unreadable. "Where did you learn to play like that?" he finally asked, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "I was a scholarship student," Sophia explained. "I studied piano from age 7 until I had to stop." Lambert walked closer, looking at her as if seeing her for the first time. "Why did you never mention this before?" "It wasn't relevant to cleaning your house, sir." A flash of something, embarrassment perhaps, crossed Lambert's face. "No, I suppose not." He straightened his tie. "Well, this solves our problem for tonight. You'll play for the dinner party. Mrs. Bennet will adjust your duties so you can prepare." "Thank you, sir." "The guests arrive at 7. Be ready." With that, he turned and walked away, already pulling out his phone to make another call. Sophia sat frozen at the piano bench, overwhelmed by what had just happened. After years of hiding who she really was, of pushing down her passion to focus on survival, she would play again, really play. For an audience, Mrs. Bennet appeared in the doorway, her expression a mix of surprise and something else Sophia couldn't quite identify. "So he's having you play tonight," she said. Sophia nodded. "Did you tell him about hearing me the other day?" "No," Mrs. Bennet replied. "That was your story to tell, not mine." "Thank you," Sophia said sincerely. Mrs. Bennet's usual stern expression softened slightly. "You'd better go home and rest. I'll have one of the kitchen staff finish your tasks. Be back by 6 and wear something appropriate." "I don't have anything appropriate for this," Sophia admitted. Her wardrobe consisted mainly of practical clothes for work and home, nothing suitable for performing at an elegant dinner party. Mrs. Bennet sighed. "Come with me." She led Sophia up the back stairs to the 3rd floor, where an entire room was dedicated to Mrs. Lambert's overflow clothing. Although Richard Lambert's wife spent most of her time at their apartment in the city, her presence filled the mansion in the form of barely worn designer clothes and shoes. "Mrs. Lambert won't miss one dress for an evening," Mrs. Bennet said, opening the closet door. "She hasn't worn half of these. Find something that fits and return it clean tomorrow." Sophia stared at the rows of beautiful clothes. "I couldn't possibly. Would you rather play piano for millionaires while wearing your cleaning uniform?" Mrs. Bennet asked with a raised eyebrow. "No, but then pick a dress. I'll help you choose something suitable." An hour later, Sophia left the Lambert estate with a garment bag containing a simple but elegant black dress. At home in her tiny apartment, she laid it carefully across her bed, then sat down at the small electronic keyboard she'd bought secondhand years ago. Her fingers felt stiff as she began to practice, playing through the pieces she thought would be appropriate for tonight's event. As she played, memories flooded back. Her first recital at age 8, the scholarship audition that had changed her life, the standing ovation after her performance of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 with the Academy Orchestra. For years, she'd tried to forget these memories because they hurt too much. Now she let them wash over her, drawing strength from who she used to be. By the time she returned to the Lambert estate that evening, Sophia felt like 2 people in one body, still the reliable housekeeper who needed this job, but also the musician who had once dreamed of concert halls and recording contracts. The borrowed dress fit perfectly, its simple lines elegant against her olive skin. She'd pinned her dark hair into a sophisticated twist and applied minimal makeup. When she caught sight of herself in the mirror near the servants' entrance, she hardly recognized the woman looking back at her. Paulo the chef whistled when he saw her. "Sophia, look at you, like a movie star." She blushed, unused to such attention. "It's just for tonight. Mr. Lambert needed a pianist." Paulo's eyes widened. "You play piano? For real?" "For real," she confirmed with a small smile. "Full of surprises, this one," he said, shaking his head in amazement. Mrs. Bennet appeared, wearing a more formal version of her usual attire. "Sophia, the guests are arriving. Mr. Lambert wants you to start playing as they come in. Just background music for now." Sophia nodded, her mouth suddenly dry with nervousness. "You'll be fine," Mrs. Bennet said, correctly reading her anxiety. "Just remember, no matter how they look at you tonight, you're still staff. Don't expect this to change anything tomorrow." The words were harsh but kindly meant, and Sophia appreciated the warning. It would be easy to get caught up in the fantasy of this evening, to imagine it leading to something more. But reality would return in the morning, and she needed to be prepared for that. "I understand," she said. "Thank you for everything, Mrs. Bennet." "Go on now," the house manager replied with a rare smile. "Show them what you can do." Sophia took a deep breath and walked toward the grand piano in the main living room, where the guests were gathering for pre-dinner cocktails. The room buzzed with conversation, glasses clinked, and expensive perfume scented the air. No one paid any attention to her as she slipped onto the bench and began to play. The music flowed from her fingers, light jazz standards that provided a sophisticated backdrop without demanding attention. But as the room filled with Lambert's important guests, Sophia noticed something changing. The conversations near the piano grew quieter. People began to glance her way. One woman in diamond earrings whispered to her companion while nodding toward the piano. Sophia kept her eyes on the keys, but she felt the shift in the room. Her music, meant to be background, was becoming foreground. And somewhere across the room, she could feel Richard Lambert watching her, his expression a mixture of surprise and something that looked almost like respect. As the cocktail hour drew to a close, Mrs. Bennet discreetly signaled to Sophia that dinner would soon be served. Sophia transitioned into a final piece, a gentle Chopin nocturne, before standing from the piano. A smattering of applause surprised her, and she gave a small, awkward bow before trying to slip away toward the kitchen. "Wait," called a woman in a shimmering blue dress. "Are you coming back to play after dinner?" Before Sophia could answer, Richard Lambert appeared at her side, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. His cologne was expensive and subtle, so different from the cheap aftershave her father had always worn. "Of course she is," he said with a broad smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Sophia could see the calculation there. He was taking credit for discovering her as if her talent was somehow his accomplishment. "Sophia will entertain us properly after dinner." That was just a taste. The woman looked impressed. "Where did you find her, Richard?" "She's extraordinary." Lambert's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Oh, Sophia has been with us for some time now. A hidden talent right under our noses." He turned to Sophia. "Take a break while we eat, then be ready to play again for dessert." Sophia nodded and slipped away, feeling strangely torn. Part of her wanted to correct him, to say she wasn't found like some trinket at a flea market. She had studied and sacrificed for her skill. But the practical side of her, the side that had kept her employed and her family fed for 3 years, knew better than to contradict the man who signed her paychecks. In the kitchen, chaos reigned as the staff prepared to serve the first course. Paolo was plating delicate portions of seared scallops, barking orders at his assistants while Mrs. Bennet coordinated the servers. "There she is, our secret maestro," Paolo called when he spotted Sophia. "They loved you out there." "I could hear it even back here." Sophia blushed. "I just played some simple pieces." "Nothing about your playing is simple," said a quiet voice behind her. Sophia turned to see a tall, slender man in his 60s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wasn't dressed as formally as the other guests, wearing a turtleneck rather than a tie with his suit. "I'm sorry. The kitchen isn't open to guests," Mrs. Bennet said. "Hurrying over. My apologies," the man said. "I was looking for the restroom and got turned around. But I'm glad for the mistake, as it let me meet this remarkable pianist properly." He extended his hand to Sophia. "I'm Vincent Chen. I teach at the Westridge Conservatory of Music." Sophia's heart skipped a beat. The Westridge Conservatory was one of the most prestigious music schools in the country. She shook his hand, suddenly very conscious of her calloused fingertips. "Sophia Rodriguez," she said. "It's an honor to meet you, Professor Chen." He smiled, clearly pleased she recognized his name. "Your technique is impressive, especially for someone who doesn't play professionally." It wasn't a question, but the curiosity in his voice was clear. "I studied at the Royal Academy in Vienna," Sophia explained. "But that was a long time ago." Chen's eyebrows rose.
"Vienna, under whom?"
"Professor Heinrich Baumann." "Baumann?" Chen looked genuinely shocked. "He rarely takes students. You must have been exceptional." Mrs. Bennet cleared her throat loudly. "Professor, the first course is being served. I can show you back to the dining room." Chen nodded, but before leaving, he pulled a small card from his pocket and pressed it into Sophia's hand. Find me after dinner. I'd like to hear more about your studies with Bauman. After he left, Sophia stared at the business card in her hand. Professor Vincent Chen, Department Chair, Piano Performance, Westridge Conservatory of Music. You should eat something, Paolo said, pushing a small plate of food toward her. Can't play well on an empty stomach. Sophia ate mechanically, her mind swirling with thoughts. Meeting Professor Chen felt like a sign, a glimpse of the world she'd left behind. But what did it mean? Nothing could change her responsibilities, her family's needs. After dinner, the guests moved to the large living room where dessert and coffee would be served. Sophia returned to the piano, feeling the weight of expectation now. During cocktails, she had been background music. Now everyone would be watching, listening, including a renowned piano professor. Richard Lambert approached as she seated herself at the bench. Play something impressive, he said in a low voice. The Henderson Group is worth millions in potential investment. I need them to remember this evening. Sophia nodded, though inwardly she bristled at being ordered around like a performing monkey. She had been trained as an artist, not entertainment for the wealthy. But tonight she was still an employee doing her job. As the room settled, Sophia began to play. She started with a piece she knew would appeal to this audience. A lively, technically impressive Liszt composition that showcased her skill without being too avant-garde for untrained ears. The room fell silent except for the notes flowing from the piano. Sophia lost herself in the music, her fingers finding their old strength and precision. The years fell away, and for a few precious minutes she wasn't a housekeeper playing dress-up in a borrowed gown. She was herself, the talented musician she had always been meant to be. When she finished, the applause was immediate and enthusiastic. Sophia looked up to see genuine appreciation on the faces of Lambert's guests. Even Lambert himself looked impressed, though he quickly masked it with a practiced smile of pride, as if her performance was somehow his doing. Bravo, called Professor Chen from the back of the room. Magnificent. Sophia inclined her head in acknowledgement, then moved into her next piece, a complex Rachmaninoff prelude that had once been her signature performance. As she played, she noticed a few guests exchanging whispers, glancing between her and Lambert with puzzled expressions. They were putting together that she wasn't a hired performer for the night. The whispers spread like ripples in a pond. She finished the Rachmaninoff to even more enthusiastic applause. A woman near the front asked loudly, "Richard, where did you discover such talent? She's better than the pianist at the symphony benefit last month." Lambert stepped forward, champagne glass in hand. "As I mentioned earlier, Sophia has actually been with us for some time." He paused, clearly choosing his words carefully. "She usually helps keep the house running smoothly, but when our scheduled pianist canceled, she volunteered her services." The woman looked confused. "You mean she works for you?" "Like as staff." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Sophia's cheeks burned with humiliation. She had known this moment might come, the moment when they all realized she was just the help. Lambert cleared his throat, looking suddenly uncomfortable. "Sophia is a valued member of our household staff, yes, but as you can hear, her talents clearly extend beyond that role." "Beyond that role?" A short, balding man laughed incredulously. "That's like saying Michelangelo was a pretty good painter. I haven't heard playing like that outside of Carnegie Hall." Professor Chen stepped forward. "If I may, Richard." Without waiting for permission, he addressed the room. "What you're witnessing tonight is not just talent, but classical training of the highest order. Ms. Rodriguez studied under Heinrich Baumann at the Vienna Royal Academy, one of the most selective teachers in the world. Her technique shows years of professional training. All eyes turned to Sophia, who wished she could disappear into the piano bench. This was not how she had imagined her evening going. She had expected to play, perhaps receive a few compliments, and return to her regular duties in the morning. Now Professor Chen had revealed her background to a room full of people who saw her only as Lambert's servant. "Is that true?" a white-haired woman asked Sophia directly. "You studied in Vienna?" Sophia straightened her back slightly. "Yes, ma'am. For 3 years before family obligations brought me back home. And now you clean houses?" The woman seemed genuinely confused, as if the concept was incomprehensible. "I do what I need to do to support my family," Sophia said simply, her voice quiet but dignified. An awkward silence fell over the room. Lambert looked increasingly uncomfortable, swirling the champagne in his glass. "Well," Professor Chen said, breaking the tension, "I think we would all love to hear more music, wouldn't we?" There were murmurs of agreement. He turned to Sophia. "Perhaps you could play the Chopin Revolutionary Etude." "It's a personal favorite of mine." Sophia hesitated. The Revolutionary Etude was infamously difficult, a test piece that separated casual pianists from true virtuosos. It had been years since she'd attempted it. But something in Chen's encouraging nod, and something in Lambert's slightly doubtful expression, made her decision for her. "I'll try," she said. Turning back to the keys, she closed her eyes for a moment, visualizing the music, allowing her fingers to remember the complex patterns. Then she began to play. The opening chords crashed like thunder, her left hand a blur as it handled the challenging runs while her right carried the melody. The piece was named Revolutionary for a reason. It captured the spirit of rebellion, of passion, of fighting against oppression. As Sophia played, she poured all her frustration into the music. Frustration at the circumstances that had forced her to abandon her dreams, at the years spent hiding her talent, at the condescension in the eyes of people who saw her only as the help. Her fingers flew across the keys with precision and fire. The room disappeared. The guest disappeared. Even her embarrassment disappeared. There was only the music, powerful, defiant, and undeniable. When the final chord faded, the silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Sophia opened her eyes to see every person in the room staring at her in absolute astonishment. Then Professor Chen began to clap, slowly at first, then with growing enthusiasm. The rest of the guests joined in, rising to their feet in a standing ovation that seemed to shake the crystal chandeliers. And there, at the back of the room, stood Richard Lambert, the man who had barely noticed her existence for 3 years. His face a complex mixture of awe, embarrassment, and something that looked almost like shame. The applause seemed to go on forever. Sophia sat at the piano bench, her heart pounding, barely able to believe what had just happened. The faces looking back at her weren't seeing a housekeeper anymore. They were seeing a musician, perhaps even an artist. "Absolutely extraordinary," someone whispered loudly. "I had no idea," said another. Professor Chen approached the piano, his eyes bright with excitement. "That was magnificent, Ms. Rodriguez. Bauman would be proud." Sophia managed a small smile, though her hands were still trembling from the intensity of the performance. "Thank you, Professor." The white-haired woman who had questioned Sophia earlier stepped forward. "Young lady, I'm Elaine Hartwick. I sit on the board of the City Symphony Orchestra." She glanced at Richard Lambert, who was still standing frozen at the back of the room, then back to Sophia. "We should talk." Before Sophia could respond, people began crowding around the piano, asking questions, offering compliments, handing her business cards. It was overwhelming. For 3 years these people, or people just like them, had walked past her in this very house without a second glance. Now they couldn't get enough of her attention. Mrs. Bennet appeared at Sophia's side, somehow managing to look both proud and concerned at the same time. "Mr. Lambert would like a word with you," she said quietly, "in his study." Sophia excused herself from the gathering crowd and followed Mrs. Bennet through the house to Lambert's study. The sounds of the party faded behind them, replaced by the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway and the click of their heels on the marble floor. Lambert was already waiting when they arrived, standing by the window with a glass of what looked like scotch in his hand. Mrs. Bennet closed the door quietly behind Sophia, leaving them alone. For a long moment neither spoke. Sophia stood with her hands clasped in front of her, waiting. She had been in this room hundreds of times, dusting the bookshelves, vacuuming the rug, polishing the desk, but she had never stood in it as an equal. "You should have told me," Lambert finally said, his voice quieter than Sophia had ever heard it. "Told you what, sir?" "That you were a concert pianist. That you had studied in Vienna." He turned to face her. 3 years, Sophia. You've worked in my home for 3 years and I never knew." Sophia met his gaze steadily. "You never asked, Mr. Lambert." The simple truth of her words seemed to hit him like a physical blow. He looked down at his drink, then back at her. "No," he admitted, "I didn't." Outside the study, they could hear the party continuing. Someone had put on music from the sound system to replace Sophia's live playing. Lambert took a sip of his scotch. Professor Chen tells me you're remarkably talented, that you could have had a career performing internationally. Perhaps, Sophia said. That was the plan once. What happened? Sophia hesitated. She had never shared her personal story with her employers. It wasn't their business, and she valued her privacy. But something had shifted tonight, and the usual boundaries seemed less clear. My father had a stroke, she said simply. Medical bills piled up. My mother couldn't manage alone. My younger siblings were still in school. She shrugged slightly. Someone had to help. So you gave up everything and came back. I made a choice, Sophia corrected him gently. Family comes first. Lambert looked at her with new eyes. Not as an employer assessing an employee, but as one person truly seeing another for the first time. And now? He asked. Your family situation? Is it still the same? Better, Sophia admitted. My father's health has improved. My brother graduates next year. My sister has a good job now. So you could return to music? The question caught Sophia off guard. She had pushed away such thoughts for so long that considering them now felt almost painful, like flexing a muscle that had atrophied from disuse. It's been years, she said. The classical music world moves on quickly. New talents emerge every day. But not talents like yours, Lambert insisted. Even I could see that, and I'm hardly an expert. He set down his glass and leaned against his desk. Sophia, I need to apologize. Now it was Sophia's turn to be surprised. In 3 years she had never heard Richard Lambert apologize to anyone. For what, sir? For not seeing you, he said simply. For having someone with your abilities cleaning my floors and serving my guests. For never bothering to learn anything about the people who make my life run smoothly. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up slightly. I've been thoughtless. Sophia didn't know how to respond. This vulnerability from her normally imperious employer was unexpected and uncomfortable. It's just a job, Mr. Lambert, she said finally. I've always been grateful for the steady work and good pay. But it's not just a job, is it? He pressed. Not for someone with your gifts. Before Sophia could respond, there was a knock at the door. Mrs. Bennet poked her head in. I'm sorry to interrupt, but Professor Chen is asking for Ms. Rodriguez. Several of the guests are as well. Lambert nodded. Of course. We'll continue this conversation later. He turned to Sophia. Go enjoy your moment. You've earned it. Sophia returned to the party, which had taken on an almost surreal quality. Guests who had barely noticed her existence hours earlier now hung on her every word as she reluctantly shared stories of her training in Vienna. Professor Chen had practically become her personal publicist, telling anyone who would listen about the significance of studying under Heinrich Baumann. Baumann only takes 1 or 2 students a decade, he explained to a captivated group. His students have gone on to perform at the most prestigious venues in the world. The fact that Ms. Rodriguez earned his tutelage speaks volumes about her potential. But why give it all up? Asked the balding man who had spoken earlier. He turned to Sophia. No offense, but cleaning houses when you can play like that? It doesn't make sense. Family obligations, Professor Chen answered before Sophia could speak. It happens more often than you might think. Talent isn't always enough in the arts. You need financial backing, connections, freedom from other responsibilities. He looked at Sophia with understanding. The most gifted musicians sometimes face the most difficult choices. Elaine Hartwick, the symphony board member, pulled Sophia aside as the conversation continued. My dear, I meant what I said earlier. We should talk. Her diamond earrings caught the light as she spoke. Our principal pianist is retiring next season. We've been auditioning replacements for months, but no one has quite fit the bill. Sophia's heart skipped a beat. Mrs. Hartwick, I'm flattered, but I haven't performed professionally in years. I'm out of practice, out of touch with the repertoire. Details. Hartwick waved her hand dismissively. What I heard tonight was raw talent and years of proper training. The rest can be relearned. She pressed a card into Sophia's hand. Call me tomorrow. We'll arrange a proper audition. As the evening wore on, more guests approached Sophia with offers, suggestions, and business cards. A music teacher wanted her to speak to his students. A wealthy arts patron invited her to a private concert series at her home. Professor Chen asked her to consider giving a guest recital at the conservatory. It was overwhelming. Sophia felt like she had stumbled into someone else's life, someone else's dream. She excused herself and slipped out to the kitchen for a moment of quiet. Paolo was there cleaning up the last of the dinner service. He looked up when Sophia entered. "There's our star." He grinned. "I heard the applause from in here. They loved you, no?" Sophia sank into a chair at the small staff table. "It's too much, Paolo. Everything's happening so fast." He set down the pot he was scrubbing and dried his hands. "Too much good is still good, Sophia. After years of too much struggle, maybe you deserve too much good." "But what does it even mean?" she asked. "These people, they're excited tonight, but tomorrow they'll move on to the next interesting thing, and I'll still need to pay rent, send money home." Paolo sat across from her. "Maybe, maybe not. But tonight has changed something, no? They have seen you now, really seen you." He pointed to the stack of business cards she was still clutching. "Those are doors opening, Sophia. You don't have to walk through all of them, but maybe one or two." Mrs. Bennet appeared in the doorway. "There you are. The guests are leaving, Sophia. Mr. Lambert thought you might want to say goodbye." Sophia nodded and stood up. She straightened the borrowed dress and followed Mrs. Bennet back to the main hall, where guests were collecting coats and exchanging final pleasantries. Professor Chen was waiting near the door. "Sophia, I meant to ask, would you consider playing for the conservatory's benefit concert next month? It would be a perfect reintroduction to the musical community." I don't know, Professor. This is all very sudden." Of course. Take some time to think about it." He smiled warmly, but not too much time. "Talent like yours shouldn't be hidden away." As the last guest departed, Sophia found herself alone in the entrance hall with Richard Lambert. He looked tired but thoughtful. "Quite an evening," he said. Sophia nodded, suddenly aware again of the borrowed dress, the temporary role she had played tonight. "Yes, sir. Thank you for the opportunity." Lambert frowned slightly. "Don't do that, sir." "Don't call me sir anymore." "Not after tonight." He took a deep breath. "Sophia, I want to help you." She looked at him cautiously. "Help me how?" "Get back to where you belong. The music world. Professor Chen told me you'd need time to prepare, to practice, to rebuild your repertoire." He hesitated, then continued. "I want to give you that time. Consider yourself on a paid leave of absence from your household duties. We'll hire temporary help while you prepare for whatever auditions or performances you want to pursue." Sophia stared at him in disbelief. "Mr. Lambert, I can't accept—" "You can," he interrupted. "And you will. Consider it my way of making amends for 3 years of overlooking the extraordinary person cleaning my house." He smiled, a genuine smile without the usual self-satisfaction. "Besides, I've made some calls. Having discovered the next great pianist will do wonders for my reputation in certain circles. So really, you'd be doing me a favor." Sophia knew he was trying to make it easier for her to accept, framing it as a mutually beneficial arrangement rather than charity, and perhaps it was. Lambert struck her as a man who rarely did anything without considering how it might benefit him. But there was something else in his eyes, too. Something that looked like genuine remorse, and maybe even respect. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "Good," Lambert replied. "And Sophia? Whatever you decide, thank you for tonight. You reminded me of something I'd forgotten." "What's that?" He looked at her thoughtfully. "That sometimes the most remarkable things are right in front of us, if only we take the time to truly see them." 6 months later, Sophia sat in a small dressing room backstage at the Grand Concert Hall. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, hardly recognizing herself in the elegant black gown with its subtle sparkle. Her hair was styled in loose waves rather than the tight bun she had worn for years as a housekeeper. A light touch of makeup enhanced her features without hiding them. A gentle knock sounded at the door. 5 minutes. "Ms. Rodriguez," called a stagehand. "Thank you," Sophia replied, her voice steadier than she felt. 6 months. It seemed both an eternity and an instant since that fateful dinner party had changed everything. She closed her eyes, remembering the days that followed. The shock of Lambert's offer, her initial reluctance, and finally, her decision to accept this second chance. It hadn't been an easy road. After years away from serious practice, her fingers had lost some of their strength and flexibility. The first month had been grueling. 8 hours daily at the piano Lambert had installed in her new apartment, working through technical exercises until her hands cramped. There were moments of frustration so intense she'd nearly given up. convinced she'd lost whatever magic she once possessed. But Professor Chen had been there, volunteering his time to help her prepare, gently guiding her back to form. The technique can be relearned, he told her. The musicality, that's something you either have or you don't, and you, Sofia Rodriguez, have it in abundance. Another knock at the door, more insistent this time. Sofia opened her eyes. "Come in," she called. Mrs. Bennet entered, looking uncharacteristically elegant in a dark blue dress instead of her usual practical work attire. The house manager had become one of Sofia's most loyal supporters over the past months, showing up to her smaller recitals and offering straight-talking encouragement when self-doubt crept in. "Nearly a full house," Mrs. Bennet reported. "The symphony board members are all here, front row, and Mr. Lambert just arrived with some important-looking people." Sofia nodded, her stomach tightening with nerves. Tonight wasn't just any performance. It was her official audition for the position of principal pianist with the City Symphony Orchestra. Elaine Hartwick had arranged for it to be a public audition, part of the symphony's special showcase series. "How are you feeling?" Mrs. Bennet asked, studying Sofia's face. "Terrified," Sofia admitted with a small laugh. "But ready, I think," Mrs. Bennet nodded approvingly. "You've worked hard for this, harder than any of them know." She hesitated, then added, "Your family arrived. They're seated in the special section Mr. Lambert arranged." Sofia's heart swelled. Her parents had flown in for the performance along with her brother and sister. It was the first time they would hear her play in nearly a decade. Her father, still recovering from his stroke but much improved, had wept on the phone when she told him about tonight's opportunity. "We always knew you were meant for greater things," he'd said. "We just couldn't give you the path to them." "You gave me everything that matters," she'd replied. "The rest is just details." A final knock on the door. "2 minutes, Ms. Rodriguez." Mrs. Bennet squeezed Sofia's shoulder. "I'll go find my seat. Break a leg, as they say." At the door, she paused. "You know, I knew from the first moment I heard you play that day in the living room. Some talents can't stay hidden forever." After Mrs. Bennet left, Sofia stood and took a deep breath. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. Not just the past 6 months of intensive preparation, but the years before. The cleaning, the saving, the sacrifice. The letters home with money tucked inside. The nights she'd fallen asleep too tired to even dream about the life she'd left behind. None of it had been wasted. Every experience, every hardship had shaped her into the person, and the musician she was today. Her playing had a depth and humanity now that it had lacked in her conservatory days. She understood struggle and resilience in ways her younger self never could have. Sofia walked the short hallway to the wings of the stage. Through the curtain she could see the grand piano waiting in a pool of light, its lid raised to project the sound to every corner of the hall. Beyond it sat hundreds of people, their faces indistinct in the darkened auditorium. The stage manager nodded to her. "Whenever you're ready, Ms. Rodriguez." Sofia stepped onto the stage, the spotlight warm on her skin. The applause that greeted her was polite but restrained. This audience had come to judge, not merely appreciate. She spotted familiar faces in the front rows. Elaine Hartwick and the symphony board members, Professor Chen beaming proudly, and Richard Lambert, sitting slightly apart with a group of well-dressed associates. As she took her seat at the piano, Sofia caught sight of her family in their special box seats to the right of the stage. Her mother was already dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Her father sat tall in his wheelchair, his face a mixture of pride and wonder. Her siblings waved subtly, and Sofia allowed herself a small smile in their direction. She placed her hands on the keys and closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself. When she opened them, she was ready. Sofia began with Beethoven's Sonata No. 8, Pathétique, a piece that demanded both technical precision and emotional depth. Her fingers found the keys with confidence, the months of practice evident in every passage. As she played the haunting second movement, she poured into it all the longing she had felt during those years away from music, all the quiet pain of setting aside her dreams for duty. The audience sat in rapt silence. Even those who had come prepared to find fault could only listen, moved by the authenticity of her performance. She transitioned seamlessly into Chopin's Ballade No. 1, a piece that told a story through its alternating moments of delicacy and passionate intensity. Sofia had always loved this piece for its narrative quality, how it seemed to speak of hope and loss, struggle and triumph. Tonight it felt like her own story under her fingers. As the final notes faded, there was a moment of perfect silence before the applause began. Hesitant at first, then building to a thunderous ovation. Sophia rose from the bench and bowed deeply, her heart pounding in her chest. From the corner of her eye, she saw Elaine Hartwick lean over to whisper something to the symphony director. Both were nodding, their faces alight with approval. But it was her family's reaction that moved Sophia most. Her mother openly weeping now, her father with tears streaming down his weathered face, her siblings on their feet applauding wildly. In that moment, every sacrifice seemed not just worthwhile but necessary, each hardship a stepping stone that had led her here. After the performance, the backstage area filled with well-wishers. Elaine Hartwick didn't waste time with pleasantries. "The position is yours if you want it," she said directly. The board vote was unanimous. "We haven't heard playing with that combination of technical skill and emotional maturity in years." "Thank you," Sophia said, still catching her breath from the performance. "I'm honored." "Don't thank me," Hartwick replied. "Just sign the contract my assistant will send over tomorrow. Rehearsals begin next month for the fall season." Professor Chen was next, his eyes shining with pride. "Bauman would have been moved to tears," he said simply. "As was I." Sophia's family waited patiently for the important people to finish their congratulations. When they finally reached her, words seemed inadequate. Her mother simply held her tight, whispering, "My beautiful girl. My beautiful, talented girl." Her father took her hand in his grip weaker than it once had been, but still warm and familiar. "Now everyone knows what we always did," he said, "that our Sophia is extraordinary." As the crowd thinned, Sophia noticed Richard Lambert standing quietly to the side. He approached only when most others had left. "Congratulations," he said, his usual confidence tempered with something like respect. "You were magnificent." "Thank you for coming," Sophia replied. "And for everything else." Lambert shook his head slightly. "I did very little. Opened a door, perhaps. You walked through it on your own." An awkward silence fell between them, the former employer and employee still finding their footing in this new dynamic. "I have a confession," Lambert finally said. "That night at the dinner party, when I asked you to play, I didn't really believe you'd be any good." He looked genuinely embarrassed. "I thought maybe you could play simple tunes enough to entertain my guests. I never imagined that the help could be talented." Sophia finished for him, but without bitterness. "That anyone could play like that," he corrected. "It made me wonder what other assumptions I've been making. About people. About potential." He looked at her thoughtfully. "You've changed how I see things, Sophia. For the better, I hope." "Definitely for the better." He smiled, a genuine smile without the calculated charm he typically displayed. "I've started a foundation for talented young artists from disadvantaged backgrounds. Full scholarships, living expenses, performance opportunities." He handed her a brochure. "I was hoping you might consider joining the board. We could use your perspective." Sophia looked at the glossy brochure with its photos of young musicians from diverse backgrounds. The foundation's name caught her eye. Hidden Talents. "I'd be honored," she said. As Lambert walked away, Sophia's brother approached. "Was that your old boss? The rich guy who made you play at his party?" Sophia nodded, watching Lambert's retreating figure with a mix of complicated emotions. "Yes? Do you regret it? Working for him all those years when you could have been playing?" Sophia considered the question carefully. "No," she said finally. "I don't regret any of it. Those years taught me about resilience, about humility, about what really matters." She smiled at her brother. "Sometimes life takes you on detours that seem to lead nowhere. But later you realize they were actually the path you needed all along." She looked around the concert hall, now nearly empty except for staff clearing programs from seats. 6 months ago, she had been one of the invisible workers keeping a wealthy household running smoothly. Tonight she had commanded this stage, moved an audience to tears, and secured a position most pianists only dreamed of. But more importantly, she had found her way back to herself, not the young, ambitious girl she had once been, but a woman who understood both the cost and the value of dreams. A woman who knew that talent was a gift, but persistence was a choice. A woman who had learned that sometimes life's most beautiful music comes after its deepest silences.